Hi, I'm Art. I'm a BenQ ambassador, an X-Rite Colorado, a photo educator, and an overall tech and photo geek. So right now, for this video, what I have is the BenQ SW320 4K hardware calibrated display that's designed specifically for photographers. And in this video, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a review and an overall kind of look at the monitor and an overview of what I really like about it after a few weeks of using this monitor. So what I have, again, like I said, I have the SW320. Quickly before we go on, just kind of share with you my setup here. So this is my normal setup. Usually it's not on this fancy table, but it is a setup. I have this link up to a Mac Pro right now, and this is the display. And what I have usually link up to it, or what I use to calibrate the display, is the X-Rite i1 Display Pro. So it's really great little color calibrator I can use to calibrate the monitor. It's really awesome. So if there is one word that I have used to describe this monitor, is that it is absolutely gorgeous. This display can show so much of your photos. It's really great. So let's kind of dive into the review here and let's talk about this a little bit. So the first thing you're going to notice about this display itself is that its sheer size. It's 31.5 inches. This is a very large display, you know, relative to many times what we're used to. Once you really get into it, you're going to really love it because you can see your photos in full resolution. You can see all the pixels, all the detail in a very, very large size. It's really amazing to be able to see, you know, to be immersive in your photos that way. So a couple of things to kind of just think about this too is that you know, a lot of our digital cameras are now shooting at higher megapixels. You know, 24 is kind of becoming a new norm. 36, you know, it's not anything, it's not too much anymore. And then we have like 42 and even up to like 50 megapixels digital cameras that can shoot files that are that large now. And to be able to view all your pixels on a screen like this is going to be absolutely amazing. It's one of the best ways to kind of work with your photos because you can be immersive in your photos, and many times it feels as if you're there again, editing your photos, as if like you were shooting it. So it's really kind of awesome for that. But anyway, the sheer size of it is really great. I love the 31.5 inch. It's really large. And this allows you to do a couple of things too. It allows you to kind of sit back in your desk a little bit so you don't have to be right in front of the screen because you can still see a good amount of detail, you know, even if you're sitting further away. The resolution of this display itself is 3840 by 2160. Pixels. Now, if you're really unfamiliar, if that number seems a lot to you, what it really comes down to is that it displays a lot of pixels, but it's really awesome. The other thing I want to talk about too is that if you notice the panel itself, it can display really dark and deep colors, and it will show detail in all the blacks and so forth, so it's not obliterated out. It has a really good range of detail from highlight to blacks and so forth, and also have a good color rendition too. Part of it, and the reason how they can achieve this, is through the IPS 10-bit IPS panel. So 10-bit allows you to display more colors because it has a lot more bit depth to it. And the IPS panel, that stands for in-plane switching. The advantage of having an in-plane switching display, and you know, as all the SW series are, is that you know, for instance, I can stand here and I can look at this photo and it looks the same as if I move in front of the photo right here. And what I'm going to do is I'll bring another video clip as well, and you can kind of see that when we stand here on the side and we move to the front, it looks exactly the same. It doesn't change, you know, the color doesn't change, the brightness, the density, you know, nothing changed. So if you really think about it, this is good for a lot of reasons. It's good if, you know, if you're in a teaching environment, if you're in a studio environment, if you're sharing the pictures on your screen with someone, so you can be there right in front and people can surround you, and the people that are surrounding you are going to see the exact same photo, the exact same colors and so forth. You know, but speaking of the IPS panel itself, I want to quite quickly jump and talk about the ergonomics of the display a little bit. So, you know, on top of that, what you do have here is the display, mind you, it's fairly heavy. It's 31.5 inch. But what they have done is an amazing design on the stand itself and also the ergonomic of moving it. So just watch here. I'm just going to use literally my thumb and just kind of move it to the left and kind of push it back to the right a little bit. It can move seamlessly just like that. They designed this really well so that the movement is really fluid, it's really light. The other thing too is that you can pull the display up higher on the stand should you want that, or if you want a lower angle view, you can totally do that as well. Again, like I said, you can move left to right, but you can also pivot it up or down. So it does have a lot of room to maneuver. So it's a really great display for that. The ergonomics really great, and like I said, you can share the photo with someone by just turning it that way too. But the IPS help eliminate a lot of the problems. Now the other thing too is that if I show you a photo, and we're going to go into we're going to pick a photo here that has a very, very dark, well, very, very saturated sky like this one. Let's take a look at this. Now this display can show a lot of really deep colors, from like, you know, the really bright blue, bright headlights and everything, to the very deep red, to the even dark shadow details there, and it shows everything. Now the color on this is really amazing. Primarily, let's talk about color first. So what this display can do is that it can display 100% sRGB, and it can display 99% Adobe RGB. Now, if we're familiar with color space, or, you know, even if we're not, Adobe RGB is a significant larger color space than sRGB. And for a display itself to be able to display or show 99% of a fairly large color space like Adobe RGB, that's absolutely amazing. This is really one of the most gorgeous displays I've ever worked with. And that's really cool. The fact that it can show a lot of color space, I'm in love with that one, just for that feature alone. A couple of other things about the display itself that, you know, if we are familiar with 4K, if you have experience in the 4K space before, you're going to notice a few things. That 4K monitors are, you know, they're generally not easy to manufacture. That means that they generally have a low yield in general, especially coming out with a 4K monitor that has the color consistency like this panel right here. This is a very difficult panel to manufacture. But what they have done is a lot of quality testing, a lot of calibration from the factory already. So what you get is a panel that has an amazing color consistency, color uniformity, as you see throughout. So you're not going to get brighter areas on one side, darker in certain areas. That's not the case with this one, because they do the calibration from the factory to make sure that the brightness is uniform as well. So that's really another great feature about the display. Now, what BenQ used to do the hardware calibration display is it uses software. It's a proprietary software to BenQ. It's called a Palette Master Element. Now, if you have used the i1 Profiler before, the software that comes with i1 software, i1 hardware, it's pretty much very similar philosophy of approaching. You have a profiling, you can do display profile validation and so forth. And what I usually do is I use the i1 Display Pro like you see here, and I use this to calibrate the monitor. The other thing too is because the shading hood is here, what's really great about this is they built a little kind of opening at the top. So what you can literally do is slide open the top opening and literally just drop in the i1 Display Pro or whatever other device you have to calibrate your monitor in this case. And you can just pull it out like that, close it out. So everything has been thought out on this about this display. The other great thing about this display as well is right out of the box you have everything you need. You have all the cables, it links up, it works with a Mac. I'm working with a Mac right now, so it's really great. You have a PC, it works with a PC. So the next thing what I want to kind of talk about here is the shading hood. So BenQ SW line of monitors, what's really great about them is they all ship with a shading hood right out of the box, so you don't have to worry about buying extra accessories, buying extra shading hood, because it's already built in right there for you, and that's really amazing. So what I like about the shading hood in general is that, you know, it's really nice, it's really sturdy once it goes on. And the other thing too is they're just literally snap lock mechanisms, so you just kind of snap them, you lock them in on the side and so forth. But what's really great about them too is they thought out about everything. So they actually have a little opening in the top here. So for instance, if I want to calibrate, you know, when I do calibrate my display using the i1 Display Pro from X-Rite, what I can do is literally just drop that in here, just like so, and I can just have that sitting on the screen. And this allows me to, you know, be able to do the calibration with the shading hood on, and I don't have to remove the shading hood, and that kind of helps a lot. The couple of other things about the shading hood that I really like as well is all the inside of the shading hood itself is lined with felt, black felt. So this kind of absorbs all the light so you don't have light bouncing around and so forth. So it becomes a really effective light absorber. So if you want to get rid of stray light, this is probably one of the great things. Now, I, like many photographers, like to keep my display horizontal like this. I know there are some photographers who prefer to use their display vertically. And if you should want to use your display vertically, what happened is BenQ right out of the box ship the display itself with extra parts as well, so that you can make this hood vertical as well. So if you ever want to use a vertical display, you can just turn the display vertically and actually change a few parts here on the hood and actually be able to use the shading hood in a vertical orientation. Now that's really nice, because then you have out of the box, you have everything that is ready for you to use in any kind of orientation you like, which is primarily vertical or horizontal for a monitor like this. But it's really, really great. The other thing what I want to kind of touch on as well, and I find is really neat, is that all of the BenQ Pro SW line ships with what they call a hockey puck. Now a hockey puck is really amazing because it does a few things. Now, this being a larger display in general, I usually sit back further in my chair. So when I sit back further in my chair, you know, if I need to ever come into the on-screen display menu, I have to reach over, I have to kind of like navigate the menu. Well, this kind of saves me a lot of effort actually, because I can kind of sit back in my chair and I can just go through the menu by just using the hockey puck. And the hockey puck does come with a fairly long wire on this model, so it's really designed in a way that you can kind of sit back further on your workstation and you don't have to be right in front of the monitor. The other thing too that I really like about it itself is on the hockey puck comes with with a few buttons actually, but there's a button number 1, 2, and 3, and also a return button. What's really great about the button number 1, 2, and 3 is you can set them to different color spaces. So for instance, I have customized some of my buttons, but a lot of them I generally kind of leave them at default the way how they are. So for instance, if I press number 1, I'm already on calibration 1 here. This is my calibration for my display with the brightness for printing and so forth. But if I ever want to see my photo, for instance in sRGB, and this is the default for button 2 that comes from the factory, if I ever want to see how my picture will look sRGB in full brightness, I can go ahead and press the button 2 and it just switched the color space over to sRGB. It's really that seamless. It's really awesome. It's great. It actually does a lot of things so that it just does things for you, so you don't even have to really kind of think about. And then if you want to go back to your own custom color calibration, you just press the button 1 again, and now you're back to your custom calibration. One of the best features that I really like about the SW line is that you can quickly turn the panel into a black and white, and turn any photo into a black and white for that matter with just a press of a button. In this case, is button number 3 is default from the factory, and it's an advanced black and white mode. It turns the entire display into a black and white. Now if I exit from the menu here, as you can kind of see, everything is turned into a black and white, including my icons and everything. So what's great about this? Well, it allows me to instantaneously do a quick proof and a quick determination whether I want to see my pictures in black and white or in color. And mind you, it doesn't go in and change the picture into black and white in Lightroom or in Photoshop or whatever editing program you use. But what's really great about it is you can kind of get a quick preview to see if it works or not. The other benefit to this too is that you're viewing the photos in a true black and white mode, not a color mode that's trying to output black and white when you're in a color mode. So that's the other thing too, is you get really just true black and white, so you can kind of see how that looks, and that's another really amazing feature about the display as well. A couple of other things that I really like about the display is that you can do the hardware calibration and everything, but the nice thing about the panel itself is that it comes from the factory at a delta E value of less than 2. So what is a delta E value? Delta E value is kind of the variation of color. Usually what you want to do is have that number be as low as possible. The general rule of thumb is any display that can have a delta E of lower than 5 is generally considered decent. If you want a really good delta E value, a really accurate display, then you want the delta E to be below 2 generally. So these come from the factory, a delta E already default, calibrated from the factory below too, so they're really great panels. Now the other thing about them that I really like as well, in all of their SW line, all the lines that I've done for pro photographers, and this is where you really see BenQ put a lot of thought into it, is that many times I don't just use this display with my Mac Pro, this tower here. Many times I'll plug in my MacBook Pro, my laptop, into the display. And instead of every time I plug it in, I have to go and recalibrate the display or change the calibration setting, I don't have to do that because this display itself, it has 2 calibration slots in here. So what I can do is I can set my Mac Pro to calibrate to calibration 1. I can set my MacBook Pro, that's the notebook, to calibrate to slot 2. So when I plug in my notebook, I can just switch it to slot 2. When I move it back to this machine, I can actually change it back to slot 1. So I can instantaneously and very seamlessly change the display around and change the color profile around that way too. And that's really awesome as well. I know some photographers do dual displaying, dual calibration on a single machine. So what happens is they'll set one luminance for calibration 1 and another set value of luminance on display on calibration 2, so that they can change between different luminance modes. And I know people have done that too. So what I'd like to do here is quickly touch on hardware calibration and why hardware calibration it's really great. So many times if we use a panel that is not hardware calibrated capable, what we do is we generally use software. You know, it's the software that comes with our color calibrator and so forth to kind of adjust the display, the way how the color looks in the display. And this is, you know, and to be honest with you, is that doing a good job? Yes, you know, to a certain extent. I really feel that, you know, it's better than not calibrating your display at all. But the best thing to do is to make sure that you do calibrate the display, whether you use software or hardware. That's kind of like another story. But in essence, I want to kind of just briefly give you an analogy between the two. So when we do software calibration, what we are really doing is kind of like we're shooting JPEG versus RAW. You know how JPEG, you know, the camera compressed the data and so forth and throws some of the data away to just optimize the photo and just save it to the card. Whereas RAW, you know, the camera is saving everything that it sees from the sensor. Well, the analogy here for software versus hardware calibration is the same. So in software calibration, what the software is really doing is that on this computer itself is manipulating the output from the video card. So, you know, the red might not output at 100%, it might output at 91 or something. Green and blue might be another different value, so it's not outputting it as full value. So what you get with a software calibration many times with a profile like that is you get a color compression. So you don't always get the true color that the video card can output. The nice thing about having a hardware calibrated display is that when you run the calibration, you know, very similar software and so forth, the calibration software does not create kind of like a profile on the machine here to manipulate the color output. It's actually allowing the machine to output the color fully. So if the machine can output, you know, it's going to literally output 100% red, green, and blue. It's like capturing raw. And all the manipulations, all the color adjustment is actually done within the software, within the firmware of the display itself. And what that does, it gives you a greater degree of color accuracy because you're not using software that's, you know, that's inside the machine to manipulate a signal coming out of the computer. You're allowing the signal to flow out fully, and you're adjusting the signal when it kind of reaches the destination, which is your display, and adjust it before the output. So that's kind of the advantage of the hardware calibrated display. Now, overall, what do I think about this BenQ SW320 4K display after using it for a few weeks? I love it. There's no other answer to it. I mean, there's nothing else to say. It's a really gorgeous display. Like I said, the immersive experience of working with your photos is really awesome. And you know, the other thing too is that if you're a video editor or you're just not a photographer, if you're a hybrid photographer, if you shoot 4K, this is an awesome monitor to view 4K footage on, to edit 4K footage on. So it's a really great display for a lot of reasons. I want to quickly talk about BenQ as well and why I really like their product. I really like their products because right out of the box. Everything comes with it. You get the shading hood, you get the, you get the stand, you get everything. The shading hood for many other manufacturers is actually something extra that you have to buy. It comes with all the cables that you need to hook up the display to your computer. So it's really great, it's really convenient, and it just provides you with a lot of options. I think one of the best things though that they do offer, it's on top of everything that I just mentioned, good consistency, great quality, everything out of the box, is the sensible pricing. If you look at any other hardware calibrated manufacturers out there, and there's only a few of them, they're actually priced 2 to 3 times as high as BenQ is. And I think that the quality, after working with many of them, the quality are pretty much the same. But what they're doing is they're charging a lot of money for it. And I think BenQ is coming into the market at a really great time to offer a really great solution for photographers, not only to have them have a calibrated display, but have a hardware calibrated display at a price point that is really, really sensible. So anyway, the verdict for this display is that if you're looking for a 4K hardware calibrated monitor that has really good color reproduction, really great panel that is designed specifically for a photographer, then I would say look no further than the SW320 from BenQ. Anyway, this has been a review of this monitor, this display. Anyway, this has been a review of this display. I hope that you like it. If you do find this review useful, please leave it a thumbs up. Also, a lot of the products I use, I'll leave it in the description below as well. And please share this video and also like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you in the next video.